In a quiet neighborhood tucked behind pine trees and white fences, a mother left her 4-year-old daughter playing on the porch for just a moment. When she returned, the child was gone, vanished into the still afternoon, leaving behind only a stuffed bear and a trail of shattered time. For 12 long years, the case haunted the town. There were no clues, no suspects, no answers, only a mother's voice echoing into silence, hoping someone, somewhere, might still be listening. Then one ordinary morning, that same mother opened a forgotten shaving kit tucked inside her late husband's closet. And what she found inside would rip open a decade-old mystery, shatter the life she thought she knew, and begin a journey into the darkest corners of memory, obsession, and stolen identity. This is the story of a girl who vanished from her own home, and the mother who refused to stop searching, even when the world moved on. The breeze that afternoon had the kind of gentle crispness that only came with the tail end of summer in Willow Creek, Oregon, a sleepy town cradled between evergreens and habit. The Marston house stood at the bend of Orchard Lane, wrapped in white siding and ivy vines, the front porch sagging ever so slightly from age and Lily's chalk drawings. Elena Marston had been watching her daughter draw, bare feet pressed to warm wooden slats, the tip of her pink tongue poking out in concentration as she etched a butterfly with rainbow wings across the planks. The scent of distant rain mingled with fallen leaves and sidewalk chalk. Then the phone rang. It was the hospital. Her mother, who'd been in and out of ICU for weeks. Elena's heart sank at the caller ID. She told Lily she'd be right back, kissed the top of her daughter's head, and stepped into the house, leaving the screen door creaking behind her. She was gone 3 minutes, just 3. Long enough for her hands to tremble as she held the phone, long enough to write down a medication change. And when she returned to the porch, phone still in hand, the butterfly was only half colored, the chalk pieces scattered like brittle candy, and Lily was gone. No scream, no sound of footsteps, no giggle of a child hiding behind a bush. Just the kind of absence that burned. At first, she called her name, then louder. Then she ran, down the porch, across the front lawn, calling out to neighbors, her voice cracking as panic overtook protocol. The police arrived fast. Willow Creek didn't have many emergencies. They asked questions, brought dogs, canvassed the nearby woods and hiking paths. Within hours, search parties formed. Helicopters swept the riverbanks. But the house hadn't heard a scream, and no one had seen a thing. There was no broken fence, no candy wrapper, or lost shoe. It was as though Lily had evaporated. 4 years old, 40 inches tall, last seen in a pink sundress with yellow sandals, drawing a butterfly. The news channels covered it for a week. A town held its breath. But nothing came, and the porch remained empty. Nathan Marston, her husband, had handled things differently. Where Elena unraveled, he held. He put up posters, set up tip lines, drove all the way to Salem and back chasing false leads. But as months turned to years, the edges of their marriage frayed. Elena couldn't sleep without leaving Lily's room light on. She couldn't throw away her daughter's worn shoes or brush. Nathan, by contrast, packed the toys, boxed the drawings, and sealed the photos away. He said it was time to move forward. She said he had no heart. He called it healing. She called it erasure. And somehow, they stayed together, bound by a shared loss and an unspoken question neither could ever voice. Who were we before the silence? 12 years later, Elena was 45, living in the same house with the same cracked porch. Though the butterfly had long since faded, the street was quieter now. Her mother had passed. The neighborhood kids were in high school. But some things hadn't changed. The light in Lily's room was still left on, and Elena's migraines still came in waves, particularly when the seasons turned. That morning she awoke with one clawing behind her eyes, the kind that made the edges of light shimmer and her stomach lurch with nausea. Nathan had already gone out for his jog. She groped her way to the bathroom cabinet, expecting to find the usual bottle of ibuprofen. Empty. "Damn it, Nathan," she whispered, forehead pressed to the mirror. Her voice was hoarse with pain. He always forgot to restock. Always. Then she remembered. He kept a travel pack in his shaving kit. Something about needing it for the office. It sat zipped on the sink, brown canvas with a worn leather pull tab. She opened it, expecting rattling pills. Instead, her hand brushed cardboard. Not a bottle, a box. She pulled it out, confused. Through her blurred vision, she made out the words, Plan B, 1 step. She blinked. Hard. There were 2 packs inside, unopened, a CVS receipt from Everpine tucked underneath. Everpine? That was almost an hour away. Her head throbbed, but now her heart did too. Their sex life had been non-existent for years, not since Lily, not after the grief swallowed them whole. She stood frozen in the bathroom, staring at the emergency contraceptive in her hand. 12 years of unresolved grief, of unspoken distance. And now this? She heard the door downstairs. Nathan was back. The front door opened and closed with practiced normalcy. His footsteps came up the stairs, the squeak of his sneakers, the rhythm of his breath. And still she stood there, bottle in hand, as her migraine receded into something colder, darker, sharper. Not just betrayal, but a whisper of something else. Something that made her blood run cold. Something that made the years twist and the silence of that porch come roaring back. Elena didn't speak as Nathan entered the bathroom, sweat clinging to his temple, the lines of age etched deeper around his mouth than she remembered. The same man who had once lifted Lily onto his shoulders during cherry blossom season, and now stood casually wiping his face with a towel while she held the proof of something inexplicable in her hand. He froze mid-step when his gaze landed on the box. Plan B, bold black lettering on sterile white, and in the second it took for his eyes to flick from the packaging to her face, something changed. Something primal, like the tilt of a predator's head when cornered. "Whose is this?" she asked, voice thin and papery, barely pushing past her dry throat, but firm enough to slice through the steam that lingered from his run. "Where did you get this, Nathan?" And his answer didn't come, not right away. Instead, he reached out and snatched the box from her hand with startling speed, his movements jerky, violent, and the fury that erupted was so sudden, so volcanic, it made her stumble back against the bathroom wall as he spat. "You're unbelievable!" Voice thick with venom. "Going through my things? You really are losing it, Elena." And she blinked in disbelief, not just at the accusation, but at the rage. It was too much, disproportionate, panicked, and that's when she knew he wasn't just angry, he was scared. "I was looking for ibuprofen," she whispered, the fog of the migraine replaced now with the sharper clarity of fear. And Nathan stepped closer, finger raised, his breath sour from protein bars and denial. "No, you were looking for trouble, like always, because you can't let it go. She's gone, Elena. She's been gone for 12 years, and you're still living in the goddamn past." And when he said she, when he said gone, it was like being hit all over again, because in his mouth, Lily had become an inconvenience, a fracture too old to matter, and all Elena could see was her little girl in a pink sundress vanishing into the wind without a trace. And the man in front of her now, this man, he wasn't grieving, he was hiding. "What were you doing in Everpine?" she asked suddenly, the name falling from her lips like a test, a stone thrown into still water, and for the first time, Nathan faltered, just slightly, his brow tightening before he barked, "I don't know what you're talking about." Too fast, too sharp. And the silence that followed was thicker than any lie. He pushed past her, storming into the bedroom, yanking open drawers like it was the furniture's fault, grabbing clean clothes with movements too rehearsed. "Where are you going?" she asked, heart pounding in her throat. And he muttered something about errands, hardware store, maybe golf, and slammed the closet shut with enough force to rattle the framed photo of Lily on the nightstand, the only one Elena had refused to put away. She didn't try to stop him, not yet. She stood there, staring at the door he had just walked through, and realized that she had seen Nathan guilty before, when he'd forgotten their anniversary and tried to hide gas station roses, or lied about where he was during a work trip. But this wasn't guilt. This was fear wearing anger like a mask, and it was slipping. 20 minutes after he drove away, she found herself back in the bathroom, the shaving kit still open, her fingers tracing the lining like it might whisper more secrets. And tucked beneath his cologne bottle, she found the receipt again. CVS Pharmacy, Everpine, dated last Tuesday at 8:42 p.m. Nathan had told her he was working late that night, a server maintenance issue that couldn't wait, and suddenly Elena was on autopilot, moving through the house with a purpose she hadn't felt in years, the dull hum of dread growing louder in her ears. In his home office, a room she had long avoided out of respect or numbness, she opened the top drawer of his desk, fingers trembling as they flipped through neatly organized credit card statements, rows of ordinary purchases, gas stations, groceries, coffee shops, until that same CVA showed up again and again and again, Everpine, sometimes twice a month, amounts that didn't make sense. $47, 82 cents, $91, 44 cents, $60. 19, far too much for just emergency contraception. And alongside those charges, purchases from Target and Kroger in the same town, all with oddly specific items listed. Teenage shampoo, feminine hygiene products, vitamin gummies for children, strawberry-scented body wash that smelled like the one Lily used when she was little, and Elena's chest constricted so tightly she had to sit down, because the truth wasn't whispering anymore. It was screaming. She dug deeper, unlocking the lower drawer using the key she remembered he kept taped beneath the desk calendar, just as he had during tax season. And what she found inside wasn't just suspicious, it was deliberate. Utility bills, gas, and electric, all addressed to a house she'd never heard of. 47 Hollow Pine Road, Everpine. All paid consistently for years, with usage levels suggesting someone lived there full time. She photographed everything, every receipt, every document, her hands shaking as she backed away from the desk like it might bite her. And then, still numb, she typed the address into her phone's GPS, 48 minutes away, through 2 counties, past the edges of her world. The sun was already tilting west when she slid into her Honda and pulled out of the driveway, adrenaline pulsing, grief sharpened into suspicion because something was very wrong, something that had been hidden in plain sight for years, and if she didn't look now, if she didn't follow this thread, she might never know what had really happened to her daughter on that porch 12 years ago. The drive to Everpine felt like a dream stitched together with dread, the kind where nothing looks familiar even when you've passed it before. And as Elena navigated her silver Honda through winding roads lined with skeletal pine trees and patches of fog that clung to the asphalt like old secrets, her GPS counted down the minutes with mechanical indifference. 46, 41, 39. And all the while her hands clutched the steering wheel like it might float away if she let go. Her mind kept replaying the numbers on those receipts, the dates, the items. Plan B, children's shampoo, gummy vitamins, deodorant marketed to teen girls, and with every passing mile, the timeline carved itself deeper into her thoughts. Not just 3 months or 1 year, but 12. 12 years of Nathan driving to Everpine, 12 years of purchases made in secret, of utilities paid on time for a house she had never seen or heard of, a house that did not exist in their marriage, in their memories, in their grief, and yet had always existed in his life, like a shadow stitched just beyond her sightline. When the GPS instructed her to exit the highway and turn onto Whisper Hollow Lane, she felt her stomach twist as the manicured homes gave way to crumbling fences, rusted mailboxes, and driveways scattered with broken toys and sun-bleached patio chairs. And then came the final turn, Hollow Pine Road, a cracked and neglected street that seemed to narrow with each bend, curling deeper into the woods until the town fell away behind her like a lie too tired to keep pretending. She slowed to a crawl, scanning each house, each set of numbers barely legible on peeling paint or tilted mailboxes, until, at the very end, tucked between 2 weeping oaks and backed by dense, snarled forest, sat 47 Hollow Pine Road, a 1-story ranch house with sickly yellow siding and windows that had been covered from the inside with thick curtains and sheets of newspaper, every edge duct-taped like someone had wanted not just privacy, but isolation, silence. Elena pulled over several houses down, parked behind a rusted-out pickup truck, and cut the engine, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might echo. And then she just stared, studying every inch of the property, the sagging porch, the unkempt grass waist-high with weeds, the gleaming new brass padlock on the chain-link gate, and the driveway, which was clean, with fresh tire tracks crossing through the gravel, oil stains soaking the ground in the same place, over and over, like a pattern of repetition. Of someone who came here frequently, possibly lived here, or kept someone else here. Her eyes scanned the roofline. No missing shingles, no sagging beams. It was a house that had been maintained, but deliberately obscured, a contradiction that made her pulse spike. A movement in the corner of her eye caught her attention. An elderly woman with a tiny dog shuffling past. And Elena, thinking quickly, rolled down her window and put on a practiced smile. "Excuse me, ma'am, I'm thinking of buying in the area. What's this neighborhood like?" And the woman, clearly eager for conversation, shuffled closer, her dog sniffing at Elena's tires. Used to be nice, she said, her voice crackling like leaves. Still quiet mostly, but not that one, she added, glancing toward 47. You're not looking at that house, are you? Elena shook her head carefully. No, why? And the woman hesitated, her voice dropping like the temperature. Man comes and goes at all hours. Drives a big dark truck. Been like that for years now. Never says a word, just watches. And she shivered despite the warm air. I tried saying hello once. He just stared. Didn't even blink. Made me feel wrong. And then, as her dog tugged at the leash, she added almost like a confession. I called the city about the yard once or twice, but nothing changed. Sometimes I hear machines at night. Not loud, like construction. Humming, then silence. But the next morning, the place looks exactly the same. And Elena felt her throat tighten, her chest constrict. Have you ever seen anyone else go in or out? She asked, and the woman thought for a long moment, then nodded faintly. Maybe once or twice. Lights at odd hours, shadows in the back window. Can't be sure. I don't walk past there anymore after dark. Her phone rang. It was Nathan. Elena's hands trembled as she declined the call, forcing herself to remain calm, forcing her voice not to shake as she thanked the woman, who wandered off down the road, her dog's nails clicking against the sidewalk. And the minute they disappeared around the corner, Elena grabbed her phone and snapped rapid photos of the house, the lock, the tracks, the curtains, the number above the door half faded but still visible, 47, like a secret waiting to be spoken out loud. And as she stared at that locked gate, at that house with its blind windows and buried screams, a truth took shape in her chest. Not a theory, not a hunch, but a certainty, like gravity. Something or someone was in there. And if she didn't act soon, if she didn't find a way inside, she might never see the end of this story that had started 12 years ago with an unfinished butterfly and a 3-minute phone call. Elena drove home with her knuckles bone white against the steering wheel, the images of 47 Hollow Pine Road burning behind her eyes like a reel of horror film frames she couldn't pause. Each covered window a question, each oil stain in the driveway a whisper of something human and hidden and wrong. She couldn't remember the drive back in its entirety, only fragments. The turnpike lights slicing through her windshield, the metallic taste of adrenaline on her tongue, the cold sweat on her back even with the heater off. And when she pulled into her driveway, she sat frozen in the car for a moment, hands trembling against the steering wheel, mind racing through everything she'd seen, heard, and couldn't yet prove. Nathan's truck wasn't there yet, giving her a sliver of time, and she used it like oxygen. She slipped inside the house, dumped grocery bags onto the counter in a staged rush, and then moved with a precise, rehearsed calm to his home office. She hadn't entered this room in years, not really. He kept it organized with an obsessive exactness. Bills sorted in labeled folders, drawers aligned like they belonged to a man who valued order over sentiment. "I'll take care of it," he'd always said, especially after Lily vanished, and she let him. Too hollow with grief to care whether the water bill was paid on time or what account the mortgage pulled from. But now, standing in the dim silence of that room, she realized just how much he had taken. Not just control, but access, knowledge, the narrative itself. She moved to the desk and gently lifted the desk calendar, heart pounding, and sure enough, taped neatly underneath was a small brass key, exactly where it had always been during tax season, right where she hoped it would be. She peeled the tape, pocketed the key, and opened the locked drawer with fingers that could barely stay steady. It slid open with an ease that felt mocking, and inside were neatly organized manila folders labeled by year and type, taxes, investment records, insurance, medical, but tucked in the very back, buried behind documents she was meant to see, was an unlabeled folder with edges frayed from years of handling. Elena opened it with the care of someone defusing a bomb, and what she found inside sent a cold current down her spine. Utility bills, all addressed to 47 Hollow Pine Road, each one showing regular payments for gas, electricity, water, all suggesting someone was living there full-time. She flipped through pages, bills dating back nearly a decade, all in perfect order, none missing, followed by printouts of online purchases, vitamins, hygiene products, clothes in youth sizes, and beneath it all, tucked like an afterthought, a single sheet titled Transfer of Ownership, DMC Holdings, LLC, signed with Nathan's unmistakable looping signature. Elena gasped, stepping back. the air suddenly too thick. Because DMC Holdings was the name of the shell company Nathan had once helped manage for his brother before he moved overseas. And she remembered now. David, younger by 3 years, impulsive and full of plans, had left for Thailand 14 years ago with a duffel bag full of dreams and a power of attorney form signed across the Marston kitchen table. Just for the properties, he'd said, laughing as Lily colored at the same table. Marcus will make sure they don't fall apart while I'm chasing Thai import deals. And Nathan had nodded, reliable, responsible, always the one people trusted, even her. Her stomach turned as the years folded over each other, compressing into the shape of a lock she had just picked open. He had the legal authority. He had the time, he had the cover. And she had been sleeping beside him every night since. She snapped photos of everything, fingers trembling, documenting the paper trail like it might vanish if she blinked too long, and then carefully, methodically, she returned everything to its place, even retaped the key beneath the calendar, the same way he'd done for years, and by the time Nathan's truck pulled into the driveway, she was already unpacking milk and bread, her hands moving on muscle memory, while her mind screamed beneath the surface. The front door opened with its familiar creak, and his voice called out, casual, practiced, "You find the Advil?" As though the world hadn't cracked in half while he was gone. "Yeah," she lied smoothly. It was under the sink after all, and he walked into the kitchen with that same old smile that had once made her feel safe, kissed her cheek like he always did, and poured himself a glass of water while she watched his every move, every twitch of his jaw, every bead of sweat that hadn't dried from his jog. "You okay?" he asked, and she nodded. "Just tired." And he looked at her for a beat too long, like he was searching for something behind her eyes. But then, satisfied or fooled, he turned away and grabbed the mail, whistling low under his breath. And Elena, standing there, her phone buzzing in her back pocket with a reminder she didn't remember setting, made a decision in that moment. Not out of rage, not even fear, but out of certainty. She had 48 minutes of daylight left, one address, and a key he didn't know she had. And if she didn't go now, if she didn't find out what was behind those sealed windows, she might never forgive herself. And worse, she might never see her daughter again. Elena's fingers trembled as she turned the ignition, her breath shallow and rapid. The paper trail she had just uncovered still fresh in her mind. Receipts, utilities, legal transfers all pointing to 47 Hollow Pine Road. And more than that, a ritual, a routine, a double life conducted beneath her nose with surgical precision and practiced deceit. She backed out of the driveway slowly, praying that Nathan wouldn't return for something forgotten. His wallet, his phone, his mask of normalcy. And when the street behind her lay still and suburban again, she pressed harder on the gas pedal, her mind locked in 1,000 possibilities, none of which ended well. This wasn't a theory anymore. It was a direction. A destination with coordinates and clues and an address that existed in reality, not in the realm of grief, not in dreams, but in asphalt, bricks, locks, and secrets. Her hands gripped the wheel tighter as the landscape changed, townhomes turning to sparse fields, neighborhoods giving way to the edges of nowhere, and still the GPS guided her forward with mechanical calm. Every syllable a metronome, counting down the final stretch to something she wasn't sure she was ready to face. When she turned onto Hollow Pine Road again, everything felt different. Not like a place she'd visited earlier that day, but a dream warped and lengthened, shadows grown longer, edges more jagged. She passed the same rusted truck, the same crooked mailbox, the same peeling street sign like a memory repeating itself in a fevered loop. And when she saw the house again, yellowed siding sagging like tired skin, windows blackened by layers of fabric and fear, her stomach coiled. She parked 3 doors down again, just as before, careful to keep the car partially hidden by an abandoned SUV with 2 flat tires and a tarp hanging loose off its roof like dead skin. She stepped out slowly, every breath shallow, every nerve tuned to braking, and approached the chain-link fence that surrounded the house. There was no address marker on the gate now, just the gleaming brass padlock she had seen earlier, polished, almost new, a lock that had no business being on a place this forgotten. Her heart pounded as she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the brass key she had taken from under Nathan's desk calendar, the one he thought she would never notice, never touch. After all, She had never touched anything in that office for 12 years, not since the day they stopped speaking about Lily in full sentences. Her fingers shook as she inserted the key, the teeth sliding in with eerie ease, and with one clean twist, the padlock gave way, clicking open like it had been waiting. She stood frozen for a second, her mind racing, her body buzzing with a cocktail of fear and adrenaline and disbelief. And then she pushed the gate open, the rusted hinges squealing loud enough to scrape against the silence of the late afternoon. She stepped through, her shoes crunching over loose gravel and patches of dried weeds, and approached the front steps, which sagged ominously beneath her weight. Every window was still covered, but now she saw details she hadn't noticed before. Security cameras, barely visible beneath the eaves, small and well-placed, pointed toward the gate, the driveway, and the porch where she now stood. The front door had 3 locks, deadbolts, heavy and industrial, and she knew in her gut that the brass key wouldn't open this one. But then her eyes fell on a side window, low to the ground, partially obscured by a tangle of overgrown shrubbery. The glass was old, reinforced with wires, but brittle with age. Her hands searched the porch until she found what she needed, an old garden spade leaning behind a cracked ceramic pot, its wooden handle soft from rot, but the blade still solid. She wrapped it in the sleeve of her coat, raised it high, and with one precise strike, shattered the lower corner of the window. The sound splintered through the still air like a shot, but she didn't flinch, only cleared the jagged glass, reached in, unlatched the lock, and climbed through with the silent desperation of a mother who had long since lost fear of injury. She landed in what looked like a living room, neatly arranged, disturbingly clean, dated furniture with crocheted coasters and framed paintings of lighthouses and rivers, like someone had tried to recreate a memory of what home was supposed to look like, but had never actually lived in one. Elena stood still, barely breathing, every sense flaring as she listened. And that's when she heard it. A sound, faint but unmistakable, from deeper in the house, a door clicking shut, followed by footsteps, light, uneven, almost cautious. Someone was here. Someone was home. Her body moved before her mind could catch up, following the sound through the hallway, past a pristine kitchen with a vintage toaster and neatly labeled jars, until she reached a door at the end of the hall. Thicker than the rest, painted a dull gray, and outfitted with not one, but 3 deadbolts stacked vertically. She pressed her ear against it, and what she heard was so soft it might have been her own heart. A voice, young, feminine, frightened. And then, as if in answer to a whispered prayer, "Daddy?" Elena froze, spine pressed against the wall beside the gray door, her heart pounding so violently she could feel it in her fingertips. The voice she had just heard clinging to the air like the echo of a dream long mourned. A girl's voice, soft and trembling, no older than 16, and the word it carried, "Daddy," sank into her chest like a blade. She wasn't ready. Not for this. Not for the confirmation of what her soul already knew, but her brain still fought to reject. There was someone behind that door. Someone young, someone who had been taught to expect the presence of a man, not the woman now standing inches away with trembling hands and the weight of 12 years buckling her knees. The 3 deadbolts stared back at her like tests, obstacles meant to keep the world out or someone in, and she reached into her pocket again, praying, fumbling with the keyring she'd stolen from Nathan during her staged fall that afternoon. There were 4 unfamiliar keys, none labeled, but one of them, longer, heavier, with the same brass sheen as the padlock on the gate, slid into the top bolt with a soft click. Her breath caught as she turned it slowly, then the second, then the third, each one unlocking with the ominous precision of a mechanism long unused but never forgotten. The door creaked as she eased it open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The smell that drifted up hitting her like a slap. Sterile bleach mixed with something far older, something human, metallic, and wrong. She swallowed hard and stepped inside, every step creaking beneath her weight as she descended, hand trailing the wall for balance, her vision adjusting to the dim orange glow of a single light bulb hanging at the bottom, its cord swaying gently as though someone had bumped it moments before. The basement wasn't just a room. It was a holding cell wrapped in domestic pretense, a twin bed against the far wall, its corners tucked so tightly it looked like a hospital cot. A small desk with stacked textbooks ranging from kindergarten readers to advanced algebra. Shelves lined with vitamins, disinfectants, and neatly folded clothing, a locked cabinet, a small chemical toilet tucked behind a curtain, and then movement. In the far right corner, behind a reinforced wooden door with a narrow wire-reinforced window, a shape stirred. Elena stepped closer, her eyes adjusting further until she could see her, the girl, curled in a corner on the other side of the glass, wearing a faded sweatshirt 2 sizes too small, and sweatpants cropped above her ankles. Her hair was long, unkempt, tangled at the ends like it hadn't been cut in years, and her skin was pale, almost translucent, as if sunlight had become a myth. But the moment their eyes met, green eyes wide, guarded, beautiful, Elena's legs nearly gave out because she knew them. She knew those eyes, had kissed the corners of them during bedtime stories and seen them twinkle under fireworks, and though the years had built layers of distance, she could still see her daughter beneath the wreckage. "Lily," she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. "Lily, it's Mommy." But the girl recoiled, pressing herself against the far wall, arms wrapped tightly around her knees, her entire body trembling with confusion and panic. And when she finally spoke, her voice cracked with terror. "So, who are you? Where's Daddy? He said no one was supposed to come down here." And Elena choked on a sob, reaching a hand toward the window, though she knew it couldn't be touched. "Sweetheart, I'm your mom. I've been looking for you every single day for 12 years. But Lily only shook her head violently, tears already brimming. "No, you're lying. Mommy died. Daddy told me. You're not real. This isn't real." And then somewhere above them, the sound of the front door opening, heavy footsteps across the floor, pausing as if sensing something wrong. Elena's pulse spiked as she fumbled with the last key on the ring, fitting it into the final lock on Lily's door, praying it worked as boots thudded down the stairs. Her fingers barely had time to twist the key before the basement filled with Nathan's voice, breathless, sharp, unraveling with fury. "Elena, step away from her." She turned slowly, heart thundering, the door now slightly ajar behind her, her daughter still huddled and crying inside. Nathan stood halfway down the steps, face red and wild, his polo shirt soaked through with sweat, his knuckles bloodied, and in his eyes was something unrecognizable. Not grief, not guilt, but obsession. A righteousness that made Elena's blood turn to ice. "You don't understand," he said, stepping closer, arms open like he could reason his way out of this. "She's sick. She needs structure, safety. I kept her safe. I taught her. I fed her. I protected her from all the filth out there." And Elena, trembling but fierce, stepped between him and the door. "You stole her, Nathan. You drugged her and took her from our porch. You let me bury myself in guilt while you kept her like a pet, like a secret you fed lies to every day." And Nathan's face contorted, a flicker of the man she once knew flashing and fading as quickly as lightning. "She doesn't even remember you," he hissed, stepping forward now, hand raised, not to strike, but to reach for the key, for control. And Elena, with her back to the daughter she'd longed for, tightened her grip on the key and said one word, barely audible: "No." The air between them tightened like a snare, Elena standing firm between Nathan and the half-open door behind which her daughter wept, her body trembling not from fear anymore, but from the storm of rage and grief and maternal instinct roaring to the surface after 12 years of doubt and self-blame. Nathan's eyes flicked to the door, then to the key still clutched in Elena's fist, and something in his face changed. Not the mask of concern he'd always worn in public, not the stone-faced husband who stood beside her at vigils or spoke to reporters with a tired but brave smile. This was different, feral, desperate, stripped of all performance. "Move," he ordered, stepping closer, his voice suddenly low and cold, a tone she hadn't heard since the day Lily disappeared, and in that moment she knew with piercing clarity, he never planned to let her leave. Not her, not Lily, not ever. She took a step back, keeping herself between him and the stairwell's last few steps, and raised her voice, steady now, like steel hammered under fire. "You're not touching her again." And Nathan froze, not out of fear, but calculation, eyes darting toward the staircase behind him, as if weighing whether to run, to rush, or to silence. Upstairs, the faint chime of her phone buzzed from her coat pocket, Harper's name flashing across the screen, her sister, loud and nosy and impossible to shake, and at that moment, Elena remembered the message. On my way, bringing wine, need sister talk. And her heart pounded with sudden hope. Nathan must have heard it too, because his eyes narrowed, calculating how much time he had left before everything came undone. And then he lunged. Elena barely had time to react, stepping back just enough for his shoulder to graze hers instead of knock her down. And as he reached for the key, she twisted, slamming her elbow into his ribs. The kind of move born from panic, not training, but it worked. He staggered back, growling, "You don't know what you're doing." "She's not ready. She can't go out there. They'll break her." And Elena screamed, not in fear, but fury. "You already broke her." As she threw open Lily's door, the final deadbolt clicking loose with the key still lodged in her palm, the girl inside let out a shriek and scrambled backward, knocking over a small plastic chair, her voice a cracked whisper. "Don't let him hurt me. I'll be good. I'll be quiet. I promise." And Elena's chest caved at the sound, the learned helplessness of someone punished for merely existing. "Sweetheart, I'm not going to hurt you," she said, her voice catching, her hands trembling as she took a cautious step forward. "My name is Elena. I'm your mom. I know you don't remember, but I've never stopped looking for you." And before Lily could answer, before anything could sink in, footsteps thundered down the stairs. Nathan, eyes bloodshot, barreled forward, arms outstretched, not to hurt Elena, but to reach Lily. His Lily, the girl he had molded and controlled, the only person who still saw him as savior. But Elena had one final card left, the scream. She opened her mouth and shouted with every ounce of force in her lungs, "Harper!" And praying her sister had already arrived, was already outside, already coming up the porch, and the moment shattered like glass as Nathan flinched, momentarily disoriented, and Elena used it, grabbing the nearby lamp from Lily's desk, a cheap thing with a flimsy neck, and swung it with both hands. It struck Nathan across the cheekbone, a crack of plastic and bone, and he stumbled back, dazed, disoriented, blood pooling at the corner of his mouth. Then, as if on cue, a voice rang out from above. "Elena!" Harper's voice, muffled but real, followed by hurried steps above and the sound of a door creaking open. Nathan looked up, wild-eyed, bloodied, exposed, and in that instant he knew it was over. He turned, bolting for the stairs, but Harper was already at the top, phone in one hand, her face going pale as she took in the sight, her sister standing in a dim hallway, holding a blood-streaked lamp, and a strange pale girl crying behind a reinforced door. "Call the police!" Elena yelled, and Harper didn't hesitate, backing away as she dialed, her voice shaking. "Yes, emergency. My sister found her missing daughter. She's alive. He's here. He kept her hidden. Please, send someone now." The house erupted into chaos, Nathan trying to push past Harper, but she shoved him back down the stairs with surprising strength, screaming, "You took her! You sick bastard!" And Elena, heart-pounding, turned to Lily, still frozen, still trembling, and reached out gently, palm up. "It's okay, baby. It's over. We're going home now." And after a pause so long it felt like eternity, Lily reached out, not to hold, but to touch, a fingertip brushing against Elena's like someone waking up from a dream they'd been trapped in for too long. By the time the police arrived, the sirens painted the evening in pulses of red and blue, their whine slicing through the thick quiet of Hollow Pine Road like a long-delayed reckoning. Neighbors stepped out of their homes, drawn by flashing lights and raised voices, but no one came near. Perhaps they sensed this wasn't just a domestic disturbance or some trivial suburban drama, but the unraveling of something buried and festering, a truth too grotesque for whispers. Elena stood on the porch with Lily wrapped in her coat, Harper gripping her sister's arm tightly like she feared she'd disappear too, and Nathan Marston sat in handcuffs at the edge of the driveway, blood drying along his temple, his face locked in a calm so unnatural it sent chills down Elena's spine. Not rage, not sorrow, just stillness, like the eye of a hurricane watching itself collapse. He didn't speak as they led him into the cruiser, didn't resist, didn't plead. But as the door closed and the vehicle pulled away, Elena swore he smiled, not out of victory, but something worse, something like ownership, as if part of him still believed Lily belonged to him, would return to him, would miss him. Inside the house, the basement had become a crime scene, officers stepping carefully through its corridors, snapping photos of the deadbolts, the cabinets of vitamins, the mattress with straps at the corners, the stack of textbooks progressing from alphabet flashcards to physics. One officer emerged holding a box of discarded Plan B packaging, nearly 24 in total, and Elena turned away, bile rising in her throat. Lily sat quietly on the steps, her arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes hollowed out by something too old for her young face, her fingers absently tracing the ridges of a button on Elena's coat sleeve, like it was the only anchor left in the world. She didn't flinch when questioned, didn't cry when EMTs checked her vitals, just stared at everything like a visitor from another planet. When they asked for her name, she hesitated, then whispered, "He said my name was Grace," and Elena's chest shattered all over again. "Your name is Lily," she said gently, kneeling beside her, brushing tangled strands of hair behind her ear. "You're Lily Elise Marston. You were 4 when you disappeared from our porch. I'm your mom," and Lily blinked, uncertain, silent, then looked toward the now empty street where the police cruiser had vanished. "Daddy said, Mommy went to heaven," and Elena nodded slowly, pressing her forehead against her daughter's. "He lied," she whispered. "He lied about everything. But I'm here now, and I will never leave you again." Lily didn't respond, but she didn't pull away either, and in that quiet allowance, Elena found a flicker of hope. They rode together in the ambulance, Harper following behind. The emergency lights no longer flashing, but the silence inside no less loud. Lily sat stiffly, every bump in the road making her glance at the doors like she feared being dragged back to the basement, to the rules, to the world where her identity had been rewritten. At the hospital, Northwood Recovery Center took them in, their staff calm and careful, speaking in soft tones as they asked permission before every step, checking vitals, drawing blood, offering warm blankets. Doctor Patel, a trauma specialist with dark eyes that had seen too many broken children, met Elena with a somber expression and a clipboard she hadn't yet opened. "It's going to take time," she said. "This kind of isolation, this kind of grooming, it's not just trauma, it's programming. To her, he's not her captor. He's her protector, her entire world." And Elena nodded, already knowing, already preparing to fight for every inch of her daughter's memory. Later that night, after Lily was settled in a clean room with pale blue sheets and a window she didn't approach, Elena stood behind the glass, watching as her daughter sat in the corner of the bed, knees drawn up, rocking ever so slightly, her lips moving in silent repetition. And Elena recognized it. Not prayer, not counting, but a litany. Something memorized, something drilled into her. She wanted to rip the glass apart, hold her, cry, scream, but she stood still, letting her presence be known without pressure. The nurse who brought Lily her dinner later said she wouldn't eat unless the lights were turned off completely, that she flinched when spoken to by women, that she asked, in a whisper, if Daddy would be there in the morning. And Elena sat in the hallway, head in hands, trying to reconcile 2 unbearable truths. Her daughter was alive, and her daughter no longer knew her name. The days that followed passed in a haze of forms, interviews, tests, and waiting rooms filled with chairs too bright for the weight they carried. Elena moved through Northwood Recovery Center like a ghost with purpose, always hovering just beyond the line of her daughter's recognition, watching from observation windows as therapists and trauma specialists worked gently, carefully to peel back 12 years of deliberate erasure. Lily refused to speak in complete sentences at first. Only short responses, mostly questions, all whispered with the quiet obedience of someone who'd learned long ago that speaking too much meant punishment. She asked for Daddy constantly, sometimes sweetly, sometimes fearfully, and when she was told he couldn't visit, her entire body would coil like a tightening spring, as if she had violated some rule he'd drilled into her. She still called herself Grace, still refused to make eye contact with women, still slept with her shoes on and a single backpack beside her bed, packed with a worn toothbrush, 2 pencils, and a laminated schedule written in Nathan's handwriting. Mondays, math, vacuuming, vitamins. Tuesdays, reading, treadmill, silence drills, and each time Elena saw that list, she wanted to rip it in half and scream, but she didn't. She folded it gently and slipped it into her purse like an artifact from a crime scene. Dr. Patel met with Elena daily, always with calm candor, her voice the kind that didn't tremble even when delivering unbearable truths. "We are working to establish trust," she said one morning, over a cup of tea neither of them touched. "But the mind adapts to survival. Lily doesn't just believe you're a stranger. She believes she's betraying her entire world by letting you near her. He's built a fortress inside her, and it will take time to dismantle it brick by brick. Elena nodded, lips pressed tight, fingers twisting her wedding ring. She still wore it, even now, like some rusted symbol of her failure to see what lived behind her husband's eyes. When Detective Moreno returned that afternoon with updates from the investigation, Elena sat straight-backed, braced for anything, but the words still crushed her. They had found hundreds of photographs, children in parks, schoolyards, playgrounds, taken from a distance, each one dated, cataloged, and kept in a locked room above the basement, behind a hidden panel Nathan had built himself. But none of the other children are known missing, Moreno said gently, tapping her tablet screen. We think he was planning, not acting. Lily was the only one he took, his own daughter, the easiest victim. Elena felt her vision blur. She didn't want to know how close others had come to sharing Lily's fate. She only wanted to know if Lily could ever come back to her. But the truth kept coming. He built the basement years in advance, Moreno continued, padded the walls, soundproofed the vents, stockpiled books, vitamins, even DVDs, films he edited himself, cutting out any scenes with police, families, or endings. Everything he allowed her to see reinforced one idea, that he was the only safe place in the world. Elena clutched the edge of the table. And the pregnancy tests? She asked, though her voice barely carried. Moreno hesitated. She started menstruating at 11. That's when the Plan B purchases began. But we have no evidence of sexual assault, no DNA, no physical trauma. It's possible he kept her virginity intact to maintain the illusion, or he used chemical control as a way to prevent risk, not as abuse. You mean to protect his secret, Elena said bitterly. Not her. Moreno nodded, eyes heavy with the burden of saying things no one should have to say. That man knew exactly what he was doing. And still, in the photos, he smiled, with Lily in his arms, in matching shirts, teaching her to play piano, handwriting journals with phrases like, Grace smiled today. She read 3 new words. I gave her extra strawberries. It was a horror wrapped in kindness, a prison made to feel like safety. And that made it all the more monstrous. Elena visited Lily every morning now. Sometimes she brought a stuffed animal from the memory box she'd never been able to throw away. Sometimes she brought stories. Books Lily used to love. Corduroy, Goodnight Moon, The Giving Tree. But Lily didn't respond. Not directly. Until the 9th day. That morning, Elena sat beside her daughter's bed, a respectful distance away, holding a faded pink bear with one missing eye. Mr. Beans, the bear Lily used to carry everywhere at age 4. She didn't say anything. She just set the bear down on the nightstand and waited. Minutes passed. Lily stared at the bear with an unreadable expression. Then, very softly, she whispered, He said you died. Elena didn't move. He told me you went to heaven, that you were watching, but you couldn't come back. He said I should never try to remember your face. Elena swallowed the sob that rose in her throat. I'm here now, she said, her voice thin but unwavering, and I will never leave again. Lily blinked slowly, then reached out, not to her mother, but to the bear, clutching it tightly in both arms. Her lips didn't move, but her eyes, for the first time, brimmed with something real, something human. Maybe even the first crack in the walls he'd built around her. That night, Elena stayed at the hospital longer than usual, sitting in the family lounge with a styrofoam cup of untouched coffee, and her eyes locked on the hallway where her daughter, lay behind reinforced doors that had nothing to do with keeping her in, and everything to do with keeping the past from rushing back in too fast. The staff had gently insisted on keeping Lily under a controlled environment. No television, no social media, minimal noise. Too much stimulation could overwhelm the fragile architecture of her healing mind, but it was the smallest things that haunted Elena most. How Lily never walked with her full weight on her heels, always tiptoed like she was used to being unheard. How she never turned her back to a closed door, always facing it like she feared who might come through. How she never used the pronoun I in conversation, always saying, Grace wants to sleep, or Grace didn't mean to forget, as if she still wasn't allowed to be herself. Only a role in a man's carefully built illusion. Dr. Patel said it would take time, but Elena didn't want time. She wanted to crawl inside her daughter's mind and tear down every lie brick by brick. shout you were loved, you were never abandoned, you were mine, into the very center of her being. And yet she knew rushing would only break what little had begun to heal. The next day, Elena brought a photo album. Not the kind full of posed studio shots, but a homemade one, covered in stickers and glitter glue, filled with Polaroids from Lily's first 4 years. Her blowing bubbles on the back porch, holding a kitten too tightly, giggling with her face smeared in chocolate cake, her tiny hand wrapped around Elena's finger the day she learned to walk. She waited until after Lily's therapy session to bring it in, laying it gently on the table in her room, saying only, "This was yours," before stepping back, heart trembling. Lily approached the album slowly, cautiously, as if it might vanish or burn her fingers. But then she opened it, and for the first time in 12 years, something shifted. She stared at the photos for a long time, longer than anyone expected. And when she spoke, her voice was so quiet, Elena had to lean in to hear it. "Why don't I remember any of this?" Elena knelt beside her, speaking gently. "Because he didn't want you to. Because remembering meant finding your way back to yourself." Lily's eyes stayed on one photo, a picture of her at the beach, cheeks puffed out, tongue between her teeth, building a crooked sandcastle. "Is that me?" "Yes," Elena whispered. "That's you. That's Lily." The name hung in the air like a melody trying to find its rhythm again. Lily blinked. "He said Grace was born in the cabin, that the world outside was poisoned, that people would try to steal me. He lied," Elena said, trying not to let her voice break. "He lied because he was afraid of losing control." Lily didn't speak for a long time after that. But she didn't close the album either. Later that evening, when Dr. Patel asked her what she wanted for dinner, Lily surprised them all by saying, "Lily wants mac and cheese." The therapist stilled. So did Elena. The nurse asked gently, "Lily?" And the girl nodded, barely perceptible, her arms still wrapped tightly around Mr. Bean's. It was the first time she'd said the name. Not because someone told her, but because something inside her had started to remember it. The courtroom was colder than Elena expected, bright but sterile, with walls that felt too clean for the filth of what had happened inside them. It had been 6 months since that night at Hollow Pine Road. 6 months since the world rediscovered Lily Elise Marston, no longer just a name printed on worn flyers and milk cartons, but a breathing, blinking girl who walked stiffly through doorways and still hesitated when hearing her name. The trial had drawn national attention, with reporters packed outside the courthouse like vultures circling a wound, cameras aimed at the steps where Elena now stood with her attorney and a nervous grip on Lily's hand. She had never imagined raising her daughter again under such scrutiny, but here they were, public evidence of private destruction. Nathan Marston sat in the defendant's chair, clean-shaven in a gray suit, as if wearing civility could mask what he had done. He didn't look at Elena. He never did. But occasionally, when Lily entered the room, his eyes would lift, and those fleeting, calculated glances were worse than any glare or sneer. They were possessive, rehearsed, like he still believed she was his creation, his masterpiece, not the girl he'd fractured and molded over a decade of manipulation. The prosecutors built their case meticulously. Photos, journals, Lily's laminated schedules, home videos where she recited arithmetic in a monotone voice, always ending with, "Thank you, Daddy." The jury watched in horror, but Elena never flinched. She had lived inside the silence of those years, and now she needed the world to feel every second of it. Lily, legally considered a minor despite her age, testified behind closed doors with trauma specialists and lawyers present. But Elena was allowed to observe through the glass. Her daughter sat stiffly, voice barely above a whisper, but she answered every question. Yes, she had lived in the basement. Yes, she was told her mother had died. Yes, he taught her to fear police, women, and the outside world. And when asked if she wanted to see Nathan again, she hesitated only once before whispering, "No, he kept me from my real life." That single sentence changed everything. Reporters printed it on headlines. The jury wrote it down. The judge stilled. It was the voice of a survivor, not a victim, not a lost girl, but someone reclaiming the truth of who she was. And though Nathan's lawyers tried to argue mental instability, claiming delusion or overprotection, no one in the room believed it. His methods were too precise, too intentional. Elena watched as he finally looked up, just once, as the sentence was handed down. 2 consecutive life sentences without parole, no emotion, no apology, Just the same stillness, the same false calm he wore the night she found him at the top of the basement stairs. But this time, the illusion had cracked. Outside, cameras flashed and microphones surged toward her. But Elena said only one thing. "He stole 12 years from my daughter. He won't steal another second." And when she turned to Lily, now standing beside her with a photo album tucked under one arm and Mr. Bean's under the other, she smiled. Not for the crowd, not for the cameras, but for the little girl inside Lily who had finally begun to wake up. Spring came quietly that year, in soft gold mornings and the scent of magnolias returning to Hollow Pine Road, as if the world itself had paused to inhale after everything it had held inside for too long. Elena stood barefoot on the newly painted porch of the same house where everything began, 12 years ago to the day, watching as her daughter stepped slowly onto the front steps, blinking into the sunlight like it might be a trick. Lily had insisted on coming back, not for closure, she didn't use words like that yet, but to see the door, as she'd said softly a few nights before, when the topic first emerged during a therapy session. And now, here they were, mother and daughter in front of a house frozen in memory, where once a pink bicycle lay tipped over and a 4-year-old vanished into thin air. Elena had spent months renovating the place after the trial, tearing out the gate, repainting the porch, planting rosemary and daisies along the edges, reclaiming it, inch by inch, from the shadow Nathan had left behind. Lily walked slowly across the wood planks, her fingers brushing the railings, her breath short but steady, and when she reached the front door, she placed a hand against it. Not to open it, but just to feel its grain, its weight. "This is where he took me?" she asked, her voice still tinged with wonder and quiet disbelief. And Elena nodded, words caught in her throat. "I don't remember it," Lily added, "but it feels like something." Elena exhaled, stepping closer. "You don't have to remember everything. You just have to know you were loved here, before any of it." Lily didn't speak for a moment. Then, "I keep having this dream. I'm holding a balloon, and I let go, and it flies up into the sky. But instead of crying, I just watch it until it disappears. And when it's gone, I feel better." Elena swallowed, blinking fast. "Maybe that balloon was never meant to stay." Lily turned to her, eyes soft now, greener than ever, and said, "I think I'm ready to be Lily now." And with that, the girl who once called herself Grace walked back inside the house that had waited 12 years for her return, hand in hand with the mother who never stopped leaving the porch light on. The past hadn't disappeared, but it had loosened its grip. And the future, for the first time in over a decade, felt like something that belonged entirely to them. 12 years stolen, a childhood rewritten, a name almost erased. But in the end, love did what justice alone could not. It waited, it endured, and it healed. Lily didn't return as the same girl who disappeared that day on the porch. She returned as someone fractured, uncertain, learning how to breathe again in a world she'd been taught to fear. But with every memory recovered, every truth spoken aloud, every small step taken under the open sky, she began to reclaim the pieces of herself that had been hidden away. And Elena, the mother who once blamed herself for turning away for a moment, finally stood beside her daughter, not in mourning, but in strength, ready to build a future where no door would ever close on them again. Some stories of disappearance end in tragedy. This one ends in resilience, and the porch light that once burned with desperation now glows quietly with hope.